My friends, the great Rick Beato made a video a couple of days ago and it made quite some waves, to say the least. In fact, it's past midnight at the moment in Vienna, so way past my bedtime, but I absolutely cannot stop thinking about it. So I want to share my personal take and a quick response with you, and also most importantly invite you amazing people to this discussion, because it's a very important one, and I'm warning you, a very divisive one. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, but first, the video is called "The Real Reason Why Music is Getting Worse." If you haven't seen it, it's a great and really interesting video. You should definitely check it out. My favorite talking points are actually from the side of the consumer, so the person listening to music. So for example, how a couple of years ago you really had to think about which records to get. You had to save up some money, at least in my case. You had to go to a store. You could only pick one record to take home, and you will have to listen to this one for quite a while until you can afford the next one. So you carefully built a collection of music. You maybe shared it with your friends when they came over. I unfortunately didn't have a lot of friends that wanted to listen to some old school Cannibal Corpse with me. But overall, just sitting down, listening to a record, reading the lyrics and looking at the cover artwork, all of that used to be a very special experience, almost some kind of ritual. And of course, nowadays you have all the music that's available in the world on your phone through a streaming platform of your choice, in most cases Spotify. All the music you could possibly imagine for a relatively low monthly price, which means naturally the listening experience is going to be a little bit different. And when it comes to this part of the video, I absolutely agree with everything, and I'm very guilty of what he said at the end of the video. I personally didn't sit down and actively listen to music for a long time. I mostly listen to music when I'm responding to emails or when I'm doing work where I don't have to listen to what I'm watching. And Rick actually inspired me to go and find my old Discman. You remember those, right? Or is my audience already too young for that? And I personally also want to aim for a more active listening experience again. But here's what's causing a huge debate online at the moment. The argument that music is getting worse because the entry level is much lower nowadays, production-wise, also kind of skill-wise, and also financially. So Rick kind of made the argument that there was not as much music back then as there is now. There are a lot of different reasons for that, of course. Some of the ones he brought up is that it was expensive to make music. You had to go to a recording studio. Recording drums alone is quite a process. You had to be a really good musician, because in the early days there was no quantizing drums or guitars or auto-tune, all of that stuff. So once again, all pretty good arguments, but there's one thing I couldn't stop thinking about, and it's that all of this also was kind of impossible without a label, where simplified, a record label would come in, finance the entire recording and give the artist an advance. There are many types of different contracts and scenarios, of course, but to keep it short, as an artist not too many years ago, it was basically impossible to build an audience, to go on tour and to have people actually picking up and listening to the music without having industry connections, contacts, a good manager, a record label. And this all really affected me when I started out with all of this, I think around 2005, 6 or 7, I don't remember exactly. So those were the days where I had my first bands and my first demo CDs, all of that good stuff. Sounded pretty great, as you can hear. I was going through the exact steps that Rick mentioned in his video. So I had to go to a professional recording studio. We had to finance the recording sessions. So we had to save up for this for a really long time. We were broke teenagers. We then of course had to pay a mixing engineer. We had to pay a mastering engineer. We had to pay someone to make the album artwork, and not just the cover design, also of course the booklet with the lyrics in it. We had to pay someone to take and edit a picture of the band, because there were no smartphones back then, I think. Or if there were already smartphones, I don't think they arrived in Austria yet. So I only had one of those. Maybe that's nostalgic for some of you. Maybe others think I'm really old and they don't know what that is. It's a digital camera. Then we had to save up some more money to actually get those CDs made. We then had to get in touch with a different company who handled the jewel cases. Once again, Austria is a small country. Not everything is streamlined for efficiency here, especially in the music business. And after we went through all these steps and we spent all this money, a process that took over 1 year and a crazy amount of money for us back then for my very first band, we finally had it, a box with our brand new CDs, hundreds and hundreds of CDs. And I remember that we were sitting down in our favorite bar and we were signing some of the records. We were extremely proud of this album that we made, because we spent so much time and effort doing this. And then in the next couple of days we started talking about what are the next steps now, like literally what happens next. We have all those CDs, how do we distribute them? The only only way we could think of doing that is basically annoying our family and friends who bought a handful of CDs and obviously never listened to them. We were an extreme metal band back then, and I think we were basically the only people in the small town I grew up with who were into extreme metal. So there weren't really opportunities for shows in the town I grew up in. Of course, we did play for 5 or 10 friends here and there, but still to this day I remember this exact feeling that I had. I knew what I was doing every single step along the way. We surrounded ourselves with professional people. I had a record that I believed in, that I worked incredibly hard on, but that next step was simply missing because I could not reach any people with my music. And fast forward to today, I can honestly say with full confidence and full sincerity, I don't think there has been a more exciting time to be a musician than right now. There are a lot of videos saying the music business is dead or music is getting worse and worse, all of that. But for me as a musician and also as a consumer, it has never been more interesting. As a musician, I think it's kind of obvious why. Over these last years, by working quite hard here on YouTube, I was able to build this awesome community consisting out of amazing people just like you, the great person watching this video, which also led to almost 250,000 monthly listeners now on Spotify, and also already around 50,000 for the new band I just formed a couple of weeks ago. So by now, millions and millions of streams coming in for my own music on all streaming platforms every single month, and that in turn makes it possible for me to go out on tour. I did my first European tour as a solo artist last year, and it was a big success, thanks to you awesome people once again. And I'm already going on my next one in a couple of months, this time together with the absolute bass monster Charles Berthoud and the YouTube metal guitar legend Ola England. If you're in Europe in January or early February, you don't want to miss that. The ticket link is in the description and in the first comment down below. But what I want to say with all of this is that none of this, and I mean it, absolutely none of this, would have been possible back when I started out. In fact, it was absolutely unthinkable for young me, coming from a very small town. Of course, I had this dream, but as an independent artist growing up in a completely random country and city, there was simply no chance for me back then to make this dream happen. And aside from all those benefits of the digital era, meaning you're your own label or your own label boss, so to say, you can distribute your music worldwide for a very cheap price and don't need a label, a manager or any kind of fancy team behind you. It has also never been this easy to produce, mix and master your music yourself. And I know that this has kind of been a negative argument in Rick's video. He talked a bit about how a lot of guitar players are using the same plugins, how no one is recording drums anymore because there are great sounding plugins, and a full drum set with mics is kind of hard to fit into a room like this. And there's truth in all of that. It's never 100% positive, but also never 100% negative. I personally think this level playing field is the best thing that ever happened to music, because out there somewhere there's a person making exactly the music that you want to hear. If you're like me, you might have a super crazy taste when it comes to certain types of music. And to me, it's so exciting that there's someone making exactly that in a random corner on the world. And once again, the artists themselves also would have had no chance to actually make a living with their music or build a fan base in this small town they're maybe from. Of course, there's also a crazy amount of competition by now with this level playing field, and you can make the argument that you don't have to be a super master virtuoso, because you can punch in certain takes after the recording, you can quantize drums, tune vocals, but what counts for me at least is the end product, and that people of all ages, all backgrounds, all music styles have almost kind of equal opportunities by now. You don't need to spend crazy amounts of money to record your music, to release and distribute your music. You can do it from absolutely anywhere in the world. And I personally found so many inspiring, awesome new musicians, bands, artists on YouTube, Spotify, or any social media platform like Instagram or TikTok. So I know that I always kind of have an overly positive outlook on things, but I would really argue there hasn't been a better time to make music, and there hasn't been a better time to consume and listen to music. But as I said in the start, I would love to hear your thoughts about all this. Make sure to leave a comment. I will try to read as many as I can. It goes without saying that I'm a big fan of Rick's channel. I love both his interviews as well as his original content. Maybe someday I can visit him as well. That would be super fun. I just wanted to share my personal take on this because it really kept me up. I'm super tired now. I really hope that I can finally sleep. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have an amazing day. Greetings from Vienna, and bye bye.